Hello everyone, in this project I'll try to set up a Wi-Fi sensor and power it with a coin cell. The goal is to run this sensor for about a year. Let's see if it is possible. We start with this basic motion sensor. In order to have Wi-Fi capabilities, we need a Wi-Fi microcontroller. ESP8266 is a good one, it is well documented and also very affordable. Once ESP connects to the Wi-Fi, we have a lot of options. We can push the information to a server and then start an automation using Alexa or Google Home Assistant. We can similarly trigger automation via Home Assistant. We can directly interact with Arduino-friendly third-party applications like Twilio and send text notifications. We can of course use webhooks and trigger IFTT events and integrate our Wi-Fi sensor with hundreds of applications. If you want to see a video tutorial with any of these applications, please leave a comment below. Well, now I'll talk about the power savings and making this sensor work in real life, but let's quickly talk about the basic working principles. Starting with wiring. Wiring is very straightforward. We power the microcontroller, we power the motion sensor, connect the motion sensor's data into a microcontroller to detect the state of the sensor, and that's pretty much it. ESP has multiple input and output pins, analog or digital, so it is very useful. And that's easy, right? Now, you wired this project, you wrote the perfect code, which is honestly very simple. It includes only a few lines. You start to test it, and it worked perfectly. A few hours later, you will notice that the project is not working anymore, and unfortunately, this is expected. Let me explain why. We use a small coin cell which only has 225 mAh capacity. Wi-Fi chip on average consumes about 70 mAh, and that gives you only about 3 hours of battery life. At this point, you are dealing with a real-world problem. There are many online tutorials about coding, wiring, but frankly, ChatGPT can do that too. If you watch until the end of this video, I'll let ChatGPT write the code for us and you'll see how easy it is. But my goal in this channel is to talk about the real world problems. I want us to be able to go beyond the blueprint, create tangible projects that's functional, has real life applications, and that are sustainable. If you like this approach, please subscribe so you are notified when the next real world problem is being solved. Back to our project. So how do we solve this problem? We know that Wi-Fi is very power hungry. So the question maybe we should ask is, do we really have to turn on the Wi-Fi all the time? Can we just not turn it on only and only when we need it? I am proposing this flow instead. As soon as ESP boots up, let's put this ESP in a sleep mode. We'll talk about what type of sleep, but for now let's say it sleeps. When there is no motion, it will continue to sleep. When the motion is detected, it will connect to Wi-Fi, do all Wi-Fi related tasks, and when it is finished, it will go back to the sleep mode. With this approach, what will be the battery life? Before we can calculate it, we need to make a couple of assumptions. Let's assume, for now, that the motion is detected only 3 times a day, and all Wi-Fi related tasks are completed within 10 seconds. Now we have a formula. The chip will have Wi-Fi on for 30 seconds, and for the remaining of the day, it will be in some type of a sleep mode. Then what will be the battery lives? How many days we can get out of this? Well, it of course depends on the sleep mode we select. So let's look at our options. First, we have the modem sleep. In this mode, the chip is pretty much fully functional except the Wi-Fi is turned off. Therefore, the power consumption is very high. We have light sleep, which doesn't really help us because it still has 1 to 2 mAh power consumption. Next one is a deep sleep, which is very powerful sleep mode and it is used a lot. But for this application, it is still not good enough. It only gives us about 75 to 80 days of battery life. Well, these are all sleep modes. We don't have any other sleep mode in our toolbox, and neither of them are good enough. At this point, you might ask, do I really need to use a coin cell? If you use AAA batteries or AA batteries, yes, they will give you 4 to 5 times more battery life, but the trade-off is that the size of your sensor. If you want to have a very small sensor and operate with a coin cell, none of these options will work for you. However, I would like to propose a fourth option, an option that allows us to power down the ESP chip when the Wi-Fi functionality is not needed in our project. And that is power down mode. Not power off, because there is still power consumption, but it is still 4 to 5 times better than the deep sleep. With this option, we can operate the ESP on a coin cell for about a year. The question is how? Before we can answer that, let's first understand how the chip operates at a high level. This information is from the datasheet. There are a lot of information, but don't get intimidated because it's very easy to understand. This table on the right top corner shows the required pin states when the microcontroller is in normal operation mode and when the firmware is being uploaded. For example, as per this table, GPIO 15 needs to be set low, which basically means that this IO 15 port needs to be connected ground with a resistor, which is usually called as a pull down resistor. GPIO 0 needs to be set to high. Again, it means that IO 0 needs to be connected to 3.3 volts. Similarly, enable pin needs to be set high. If you don't connect this pin to 3.3 volt, the microcontroller will not power up and it will stay powered down. I repeat, it will stay powered down. And this is exactly what we want to accomplish. So let's take the circuit to a playground. So here we connect the enable pin and the IO0 pins to the data pin of the motion sensor. So when the motion is detected, both enable and IO0 pins are set to high. It is also a good idea to insert the diode because we want the current to flow in one direction. When the motion is detected, all this line will be powered up with 3.3 volt and that will also power up the ESP. You may have noticed that when the motion is gone, the line will set back to low and the ESP will power down before we can even perform any of those Wi-Fi tasks. However, it's not a problem because once the ESP powers up, we can control the pin states with the software. As soon as the ESP powers on, with the code we set the IO0 pin to high, and that pin keeps our ESP powered even if there is no motion. Now we can connect to Wi-Fi, send notifications, perhaps even start some automation like turn on the lights or start a video recording. But when we are finished, we can set the IO0 pin back to low, which in return powers down the ESP. Just perfect. Now let's finalize our circuit. We don't want IO0 to float between high and low, so let's add these couple of 10K resistors. That's all we need for the ESP12F wiring. One more note about the motion sensor, which could be another real-world problem. Many motion sensors have a big output resistor to protect the sensor and limit the current flowing through it. It is good for protecting the sensor, but when the current is too low, it may not be able to drive the ESP and power it up. We have a quick solution for that. We can use a small NPN transistor to drive the ESP. Basically, we connect the motion sensor output to the base of the transistor. When there is no motion, the transistor open. But when there is motion, even if the current is too low, the base will have some current and the transistor will transmit and enable pin will go high. Again, this is about the sensor, but I think it is relevant to our project. Circuit diagram. If it looks complicated, look again. We are just applying the things we tested on our playground and also set the required pins. But I have one question here. As per the datasheet, in order to upload the code to the microcontroller, the IO0 pin needs to be set to low. Well, we know that if we set the IO0 pin to low, the ESP will power down. So how do we upload the code to this ESP? We'll talk about that in a second, but let's quickly look at the code. Probably this will be the simplest code you will ever see. As soon as the motion is detected, the ESP will power up and start to execute the code from here. We will set the IO0 pin as an output pin and then immediately set it high. and this will keep the ESP powered on. It's a good idea to put a little bit of delay and then start the Wi-Fi tasks. We can connect the Wi-Fi, send notification, and do whatever we need to do, and the code will go back to this line and will immediately set the IO0 pin back to low, which will in return power down the ESP. That's it. That's all we need to do. Look at this. Everything we need is at this one page. Wiring is simple. The code is even simpler. Let's get a Node MCU and put this circuit to a test. Wait, Node MCU won't work because enable pin is already wired and it is always set to high. Unfortunately, any other module out there also have the enable pin set to high. After all, who wouldn't want the microcontroller to be always powered on? Well, we don't want that, and we have a good reason. So hopefully by now you are convinced that this power down approach gives us perhaps the greatest power savings. I use this approach a lot, so I designed this PCB. Nothing fancy, but these red deep switches allow us to connect or disconnect the mandatory pins to ground or VCC. Here is the dip switch for the enable pin. These female headers act like a breadboard, so you can connect external components like the motion sensor. You can also use the battery connections here. This MOSFET here gives you circuit protection if you connect the battery polarity incorrectly. These two little capacitors here regulates the input power, which is usually a good practice. You also have this battery level indicator, which is a voltage divider, and all you need to do is connect this pin to ADC so that when the battery level is low, you can detect it and perhaps send another notification. So remember we said how we are going to upload the firmware to this chip? Well, that is pretty simple. You connect the UART-TTL connection here, hold down to the switch which brings the D0 port to ground, and turn on the enable switch. Then the ESP powers up when the D0 pin is down so that you can upload the firmware. As you see, the circuit is very straightforward. If you want to purchase it, I'll leave a link below, but you can make your own too. I always had trouble soldering this microchip pins and the SMD capacitors and the resistors. So I made this special breadboard. But again, if you think the PCB would be useful to you, I'll put a link below for you to purchase. But if you want to make your own, that's perfectly fine too. Here, I wired the components on my breadboard. As you can see, it's quick and dirty, but doesn't require additional breadboard or anything else. I simply connect the resistors like I would connect at any other breadboard. And for external components like motion sensors, I can run these jumper cables. Now let's put the circuit to test. Let's first get the ChatGPT to write a code for us to send a text message using Twilio when the motion is detected. I simply describe the project a little bit and let's see what it can do. It gives some more information about the assumptions and the requirements, but at the end you will see the code is prepared. All I need to do is enter my Twilio credentials and this code should be ready to use. Let me take that code and then put it in Arduino and see how it works. Okay, the code is ready. To upload it on my breadboard, I need to hold down the firmware button and turn on the enable dip switch. Now let's turn off the enable dip switch again so that our circuit is in the desired mode. And let's see if we will receive a text message when the motion is detected. This is all for the project, but I want to end this video with some discussion items. Twilio text messages cost only a couple of cents per text message, but can we make it completely free? For example, can we write a simple React Native app and send push notifications instead? Additional to notifications, can we trigger automations? For example, can we turn on the lights when the motion is detected? We didn't really talk about motion sensors power consumption in this video, and that honestly varies depending on the motion sensor that you use. If you want to use this sensor only during certain times, for example at night only, you may consider using a hardware-based timer. However, please notice that these timers usually consumes about 20 microampere, which is a lot more than our powered down ESP approach. It was easy to demonstrate the operation on the breadboard, but how should the final product look like? Let me show you an example. This PCB is not for this motion sensor, but it is the final product for another project of mine. As it's seen on this PCB, similar dip switch and push button approach can be used while uploading the code to the ESP12F chip. I hope this tutorial was helpful to you and you like the beyond the blueprint approach, trying to tackle real-world problems. Please leave your comments and thoughts below. Thanks for listening and see you next time.